I wish there were palm trees on 495. I wish there were palm trees.
Welcome to the 495 podcast, presented by Greater Long Island Media Group. I'm your co-host, Mike White.
And with you, as always, is myself, Nick Esposito.
With me, as always, is Nick Esposito.
Thanks for the introduction, Mike. And today, I'm excited for this guest. We're with Tall Mutha Shucka, Keenan Boyle.
Me.
Keenan Boyle, you live in Patchogue proper?
I'm a Sayville guy.
Sayville guy, right? I knew that.
South Shore guy.
Yeah, South Shore guy, permanent fixture in Patchogue, it seems, right?
I've been here for a while.
Yeah, whether it's performing with Soundswell, popular local jam band Soundswell. You guys are at Blue Point Brewery a lot, right?
Oh yeah.
Where else do you guys play often?
We've been doing like the whole restaurant group area. We're hitting up Brick House Brewery is a popular spot. Barbecue, we like it there. We used to do Tap Room a lot when they first opened, and we still go to 89 North, and we're on for Great South Bay Music Festival this summer again.
Again, was this the fourth year in a row?
I think it's our 7th we're going into. I think we did 6.
I guess about 2 years ago is when you got on the main stage, right?
Yeah, so we've been on the main stage for a couple years. So it's
nothing like that, huh?
Oh, it's so cool, man. It's the best energy of the summer. I can really say that we're lucky to have Jim Faith doing this festival, right down here at Shorefront Park. And we love doing that. And then also there's another festival coming up called May Day, which is in spring.
Where's that?
It's a fundraiser. It's South Haven Park.
Oh, wow.
They're
Look at that.
putting together money for the local unions. And my dad happens to be one of those union members, so it works out nicely for me.
Nepotism is alive and well in the Boyle, the Boyle family.
Exactly.
No, very good. Obviously well earned. You guys play some pretty big stages. And then you were on North Ocean Avenue at Alive After 5, right, last summer? That was the first year they had any sort of activity on North Ocean, right?
Yeah, so Dave Kennedy put in a good word for us, and Mike Avino over at Catch Oyster Bar had his first, shot at having a spot down there at Alive After 5. So we tried to bring the people down that direction, north of Main Street, which people aren't used to going up there. It used to just be emergency vehicles. Yeah. So now they're turning into a whole nother wing of the fest.
They just got to get rid of the, with all due respect to our first responders, they said they still stage those emergency vehicles right in front of you guys, so it was kind of like a mental barrier for people to get up to North Ocean and Alive After 5.
I guess it was kind of an afterthought this summer, and then the idea was kind of build momentum, and next year have like a full stage and really hook it up.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I love that area too. I forgot who told me, but it's like International Way in Patchogue. Riche's, the Irish pub, then Mademoiselle, French cuisine, and then you have the Italian pork store on the corner.
Yes.
You got Catch. It's awesome.
Yeah, you got Catch, which actually brings us to another thing that you do. You're an oyster farmer, is that correct?
I work on other people's oyster farms. At this point,
still a farmer, right?
I'm a farmer. I'm a farmhand.
Not to be, yeah, you're a farmhand.
I work. So I'm on a list with Town of Islip. I'm hoping to get my own lease eventually, but at this point, I work with mostly Lucky 13 Oysters, which is in Brightwaters, right across from like Salt and Barrel area, if you know that, there for oysters. Basically, directly across the bay, over by Captree and the Robert Moses Bridge. Yep. There's a few farms out there. Matt Welling is the one guy that I work with mostly, and he's got a great product, and he's out there working hard all the time.
And your oysters, that you catch are all over the place. I met you a couple weeks ago at the Blue Point Brewery, and you were kind of showcasing. You brought like 200 oysters. It was like a media walkthrough at the new beautiful brewery in Blue Point, but you brought over a bunch of oysters.
Yeah, so the Blue Point Brewery likes the fact that I have Blue Point oysters, which is something like the name Blue Point has kind of been dragged through the mud a little bit. It's overused, yeah. So people from other regions say that they have a Blue Point oyster, but in reality, the name came from the town Blue Point, which is neighboring Patchogue. And
the Blue Point oyster has to come from the Great South Bay and a specific area of the Great South Bay as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, and I actually spent a certain amount of time out in the Great South Bay. Yeah. So there's a law that nobody really pays much attention to.
It's like English law, right? I think it goes back to...
It's really old.
Little old England.
Exactly. Back when the Dutch were here, and there was a product to represent the Blue Point. So when I was growing up, there really were no oysters coming out of the bay. There's clams, but even since like the 70s, there weren't enough oysters coming out of the bay to actually put a stamp on it and say this is the brand.
Right.
So that's kind of where the name got lost. Is in all those years, where people really wanted that name because King of England was requesting way back in the day, so they got a great name for the Blue Point.
Globally popular.
Globally. And then, people are saying, well, where can I get that? And there's people in Chesapeake Bay, they'll say, oh, here's a Blue Point, or people up,
Yeah,
north,
we're close enough.
Connecticut.
Long Island Sound.
Yeah. Long Island Sound could be called a Blue Point, pretty much anywhere on the eastern seaboard now, as long as it's a Virginica, which is the species, you can call it a Blue Point. And that's kind of a problem for the local guys because they're starting up now, and people say, oh, well, you're in the Great South Bay, but that's not that's not a Blue Point, not a Connecticut Blue Point, they call it, or
Right.
whatever.
And I'm sure they charge more for Blue Point oysters, even though if they're not technically from Blue Point.
Well, that's kind of the problem too.
It's a marketing thing.
Yeah, marketing thing, but the marketing got messed up over the years because now you got this misrepresented oyster, and finally we have this really nice boutique oyster coming out of the bay, but nobody wants to call it a Blue Point because they'll actually get less for it than they will if they call it, say, a Lucky 13 or
Naked Cowboy. No, that's the North Shore.
Yeah, those are a wild diver harvested North Shore oyster. But there's basically, different ways to promote your oyster, and I'm trying to shed light on the Blue Point name again, and so is Blue Point Brewery because they're affiliated with this amazing, world-renowned oyster that we just need to bring the name back to Long Island.
I can tell you, I'm a frequenter of Catch Oyster Bar, and they always have, Blue Points that have oysters from the Great South Bay always on the menu, as well as oysters from Canada, oysters from the West Coast, and I think the local oysters are head and tails above the rest, and you could tell why they were globally famous 100 and something years ago, and these things were shipped all over the world, and you could see why. And if we could kind of reclaim that brand, so it's not diluted, and so it's a premium product, and these farmers can get the money that they deserve for it, that'd be awesome, man. So
you got a lot of knowledge. It's almost like you did a 1,000-word thesis page.
1,000-word thesis. That's like a couple pages. I really mailed it in. Yeah, I did my master's thesis on the demise of both the oyster industry and then the clam industry in the Great South Bay. I think it was the hurricane of '38 that sort of.
You tried to get it published, right?
Ecosystem. I told people I was trying to get it published, so they would talk to me. So I think the hurricane of '38 messed with the ecosystem and gave rise to the oyster drill. And then the oyster drill which is a parasite, sort of flourished and then killed off all those oysters, and actually set the stage for a huge boom in clamming. Until, from what I understand, those were overfished.
Right. That's kind of where I came in. My dad was a clammer in high school, and there were a lot of clams in the bay at some point, and the clams are not really there anymore either, and it's kind of become tragic because there's no shellfish coming out of the bay until now we're reintroducing these farmers, so it's not naturally setting stuff. We're actually taking seed from other places like Maine or different island. I guess a lot of stuff comes from Fisher's Island, supply us with seed, and we'll grow it out here. And, basically trying to introduce a whole different ecosystem that hasn't been here in a long time. And the reason, like you said, is the flavor is renowned because it's like wine. People say there's a terroir with wine. We have merroir with oysters. They say it's basically the flavor of the specific region, when you harvest it, how you grow it. So who the farmer is and what kind of cycle they have for tumbling, and, basically how clean you keep them. It's going to affect the flavor and the end result.
Can you get into it a bit about the explosion of the popularity of oysters? Because there was a point where it wasn't even a go-to item. Now it's you go to all these different festivals and there's raw bars everywhere serving up oysters.
And growing up in the '80s, you didn't see oysters. You didn't hear much about raw shellfish because people were so afraid of getting sick. And I don't know what happened. People aren't afraid anymore, or are there better regulations?
I think one kind of, affects the other with supply and demand. So the demand is high, and because the price has gone up so much, clams, the price has stayed the same since the 70s. It's 20, 25 cents at the dock. Today, it's still the same price. Oysters are 20, 25 cents at the dock. Now they're up to $1,
Wow.
So I think quadrupled in price in, 40, it took 40, 50 years, but still the value's there. So there's good people getting into the business and producing all these new oysters that replace those bad oysters you're talking about, down in Louisiana. I'm not going to say bad, but different oysters from down south where the water's warm, Louisiana, the Gulf. Personally, I just won't eat those oysters, any of them, even if they're super fresh. It's because there is a chance of getting sick, and the water just.
Yeah, this is just unrelated, but I was down in Louisiana and I saw the Mississippi River. I thought this was gonna be like this beautiful body of water. It's like black, dude. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Oh, you really thought it was gonna be nice?
Yeah, I don't know. You just hear about the Mississippi River growing up, and you think it's like this, this great passageway that's like, been taken care of all the time, but it's literally just been like a breeding ground of just muck.
Yeah,
like,
I guess it depends. I mean, it's so huge. I guess it depends. Maybe there are pretty areas of the Mississippi River. People are welcome to call in or comment on Facebook. But yeah, so maybe that was it. So the oyster company, the oyster industry in the Northeast sort of died off, and I guess people were sort of scrounging around down south maybe in the 70s into the 80s and 90s and kind of having bad experiences. So I just remember growing up, no one really did it, until you were always almost warned against it.
And oysters today, like I said, they're more not more affordable, but they're more accessible to get good ones. So you're going to have a good farmer that's dedicated their life to going out there and bringing in good product. And there's a lot of regulations now with the DECs on their backs and making sure that they have everything iced and tagged and properly harvested so nobody will get sick. But I guess a lot of it is just cool. Like in Brooklyn, especially Brooklyn, there's a lot of young people, hipsters we'll call them. Yeah, but it's these are people that service my company. So it's a good thing. No, we need these hip people because they basically are taking risks a little bit. Back I guess for a long time nobody was trying oysters, but now they're young. They've never had oysters from this region, and they're really interested, and they want dozens.
And I kind of liken it to like the boom of like sushi. 10 or 12 years ago, whatever. It's like to get someone to try sushi was like like when I was growing up, like no one, that's disgusting raw fish.
It was kind of an exotic thing.
Yeah, and now it's kind of like a go-to thing, and it's one of those things that I think with oysters, it's like it kind of takes a while for someone to try it, and then once they try it, they kind of get used to it, and then they start to really enjoy it. There's like that kind of that first step of like you got to get your head over it. Like when you look at an oyster, it's not the most appealing of foods.
Yeah.
And the same thing with sushi.
But then it becomes kind of appealing.
Yeah, once you start eating it and you try out the different flavors.
It's like having your first beer in high school,
Yeah, I guess.
But
it's an acquired taste. I felt when I first got into the business, I didn't know what I was doing, I was like, who's going to eat these oysters? I don't get it. And we drive them into the city. Now I don't have to go to the city. I have plenty of customers out here on Long Island because it has elevated. I guess the number of people has elevated greatly, and the amount of demand, even in not super duper wealthy areas. There's places where a buck of shuck just crushes.
Oh man, I mean the happy hours at Catch and Salt and Barrel in Bayshore. What is it, $1.25?
Yeah,
those are that's a great thing to do. Spend a couple bucks. It has a reputation for being kind of a yuppie thing, or it used to. Certainly sushi used to in the 90s. And you can go out to a sushi restaurant and load up you and your girl for $80. And it's hard to go to like a regular new American restaurant and spend less than like $120, $130. So sushi as well has this sort of reputation for being kind of like an uppity thing, or it used to. It's definitely more mainstream now.
Yeah.
But it's actually less expensive than going out to a regular restaurant. And you can go to an oyster bar and load up for just a few bucks, especially if you catch it at happy hour. And it's such a great treat. How much do you, I always see it alive by the bay shucking outside Salt and Barrel. How much are those oysters going for at the festivals?
Oh, down by the water, usually like $2 each. Maybe like you do 6 for $10, something like that.
Yeah,
almost $2 a piece. In Manhattan, you're talking like $3 to $5 an oyster, even $4.50, $4.75 at a fancier restaurant.
Yeah.
When we met, and I was just like, everyone says the oysters in Manhattan are like the best places in the world, but you were like, not even close.
Yeah, I mean the oysters are coming from Long Island and being shipped in, so
being marked up.
Yeah, marked up. So it's the same product, but you'll get it even fresher at a place like in Greenport is my favorite spot. A guy named Ian, he has Little Creek oysters. If you've ever been out there, it's like basically the Claudio's parking lot.
Okay.
There's this little bait and tackle shop that he turned into an oyster bar.
And he farms right in the Mccormick, right?
Yeah, he's got North Fork Oyster Company, and he knows what he's talking about. It's him and his wife that run it, and there's no better place to get oysters. You go out there, and they'll be super fresh, and always variable. Varying flavors. They'll have different stuff in there. And
what time of year is the best to catch and consume oysters?
This time of year, I mean, people always said that R months are the months that end with R. So over the years, September, October, November, December. That's like the fall into winter time. The water's colder, but that goes back to before refrigeration was as common as it is now. So year round, we're able. We don't need to put them on ice. We have, refrigerators and big coolers, and we can basically keep stuff cold longer. But they do go through a process through the spring and summer where they're spawning. and they're reproducing. So they get a little bit thinner then, but the best time is in the fall when they're all plump and ready to hibernate over the winter. And then they pretty much, chill out. Their respiratory system slows down, and they basically hibernate through the winter, and it's still a great time to eat them. And then it's unfortunate it doesn't line up with the season. You'd think spring and summer is when the most get eaten.
Right, correct.
But in the fall and winter is the best time, the best flavor, and it's tough because when you're trying to do sales, you want to sell in the fall and winter because that's when you get the best product available.
Foot forward, yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, when you think about it, you're out by the water or something. You want something kind of like salty or whatever.
It's a summer thing for sure. But like you said, that's interesting that the way things evolved, it was probably risky to eat oysters in the summer back in the day. Before there was
Refrigeration. Yeah.
Exactly.
People taking risks back then.
Like I said, now as soon as they come out, before they're even off the boat, they have to go right onto ice, and they're constantly monitored. And as you're getting off the boat, there might be a DC guy standing there,
Right.
like as you're getting off the boat, just checking temperature.
What's it like fishing out there in the cold weather?
It's brutal.
Yeah, I
I
can
mean,
imagine.
There's no other word for it.
Yeah. Basically, the skin on your face is like bright red. You get in the shower, and you just it's harsh.
Growing up, I used to watch the Alaskan king crab. Like those guys are nuts. You seen that before?
Oh,
The
yeah.
History Channel. Like, that's insane.
Forget it.
And then even like you relate it to Great South Bay, and it's ice cold, freezing. You can't even your face can't even
It's
feel. your-
uncomfortable walking down Waverly Avenue.
I know.
Never mind trudging around in 3.5 feet of water. So, what is life as a oyster farmhand like? Are you on boats? Are you getting in the water? Are you using rakes? Are you using your feet?
Using your toes.
Yeah, how's this work?
Yeah, so
You
they
just
don't
catch them between
burrow.
your big toe and your other toe.
That's how we used to do it with the clamming,
Yeah.
But these don't burrow under the surface; they sit right on top, so it's easier. So I originally got into it by diving on wild oysters on the North Shore. So I got NAUI certified, and I was able to just go down and as long as you have a residency or you have a proper permit, you can just pick up money off the ground. Pick it up, 50 cents, put it in the bag.
That's awesome.
But they're not as they don't set up naturally as much as they used to. So that's why I got into working with farmers. There's one guy out in East Moriches, great gun, a guy named Paul McCormick. I think he's got like one of the best products on the
Sorry. To
Oh
interrupt.
yeah, it goes the beach right there. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the name of the same name as the beach, right?
yeah. It's a great gun to legendary surf spot too. So
Okay,
he used to
gotcha.
grow up going east of Smiths Point, and he named his oyster after that area because he's kind of directly across, right by, kind of by the inlet out there. Like Dune Road,
Right.
Moriches Inlet.
So he'll be just west of that.
Yeah, on the bay side.
Gotcha.
But he's got a system where he's growing on the surface in bags that are all kind of connected, and we flip them back and forth, so we keep mixing them up, and the oysters don't go below this, maybe 6 inches to a foot down below the surface. They stay up on top, and the wave action makes them tumble and bounce off each other, which gives them a nice thick shell, makes them plump up. And with him, we're up to our waist in water. I have to put on the hip waders, and we get wet. We get in there, and our arms are in long-sleeved gloves. And that's pretty cold, especially in the winter months.
And you're doing that all year.
What I like is working with Matt Welling over at Lucky 13, only because we stay on the boat. We actually just, have a boat that services the stuff. The hard part is getting the stuff in and out is backbreaking because we have to lift the cages onto the boat where we work on a dry space. So in that case, I have waterproof clothes on, but I stay relatively dry and I stay warmer longer.
So
Yeah.
what was the name of the great gun farmer?
Paul McCormick.
Okay, I didn't want to talk over you.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. Everybody should try a great gun if you can. I'm
Very
sure they
cool.
have them at Catch.
Awesome.
Do you have any crazy fishing stories out there? Maybe something weird you saw on the water or something like that?
Got pulled under the water.
Yeah.
Someone had
Nothing
to save
too
you.
crazy. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of other life out there at this point. Hopefully, we can make that better. There actually are a lot of fishermen going by, like working on fishing boats, especially out by Captree. So one of my buddies, Tom Falco, he's out on Jenny Lee, is the name of his boat, and he cruises by, and he's like, you just hear the rumble of his diesel engine, and he actually does charters now. So every once in a while he'll stop by with a group of buddies, and we'll serve him some fresh oysters right there on the
That's
boat.
great.
That sounds amazing.
Taking pictures.
When you
and-
get the greater boat out there.
Collect some quarters.
Oh yeah, greater boat.
Just call it that. I love that.
Why not?
That could be part of a write-up to the company, especially if we're covering stuff on Fire Island.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
Talking.
There's a whole Great Seas department.
We'll swing by and pick up some oysters. We just always have quarters on you. So when you're farming oysters, they're always contained. They're in a bag or a cage. They're not just.
Yeah, so some people do spread them out on the bottom, but it makes it a little with like predators basically and sponges and things that attach themselves to it. It makes it a little harder to handle, and they can get lost in the mud.
Periwinkles, do they? What eats oysters?
Drills, like you said.
Drills, yeah.
But also starfish, crabs. Pull them open.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is like this kind of like a calcified worm that kind of attaches to the shell, and it just it makes them not pretty anymore. Doesn't really affect the meat on the inside, so you basically have to tumble them and scrape it off and constantly be vigilant.
Don't want to see old worms on there.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah, you got to make sure the shells are clean, and that's how you can tell too. Like immediately, if you're working with a guy like Matt or Paul,
who's turning,
who's tumbling them regularly and who's staying on top of it.
Awesome.
About approximately how many oysters do you think you've caught over the years?
Well, we just call it harvesting, and the guys that I've worked with can harvest up to I'd say 5,000 or 10,000 a week sometimes.
Wow.
There's a big event, and it's like right
operation.
in September, August to September. They crush it, and especially on a Friday because people are all the restaurants are gearing up for the weekend.
Wow.
And some people that only order maybe 200 here, 300 there will be like, oh, we got this big event. We need 1,000 today,
No wonder why you're on the list for the to get some underwater acreage for yourself. That sounds like a nice payday, man.
It's a great payday. It's just it takes so much to get to that point, It's like
any farming.
Yeah, like any farming, you basically have to spend money for years before you even start making any profit because you're just keep adding seed and setting yourself up for later. So you really have to think about the long game and the future, which is not natural for a guy like me. More like, this is the event, I show up, I shuck, and I'm done, It's like a more simple operation than farming.
So you're out there farming, and you're playing music, and you're shucking oysters at events, typically. So do you work do you go to private parties? Do you work for restaurants mainly? How does this shucking operation work?
So
Everyone knows you're a Tall Mutha Shucka.
Tall Mutha Shucka. I love that.
You have to see me in person. I'm 6'7", so I grew up with everybody saying, "How tall are you?" What's going on with the height? Why are you so tall?
What's going on?
Why are you so tall?
That's what I mean. If I saw somebody that was this much taller, actually, there was a guy in Patchogue. One time I saw him at barbecue. He was like 7 feet tall, and I was like, "Oh my god!
Why
look
are you
at this
so
guy."
tall?
Yeah. Like, how tall are your parents? Did you play basketball? There's like the whole group of questions. So now I'm like, I got to capitalize on that. I might as well, since everybody wants to talk to me about my height, turn it around and make it into what I'm trying to push, which is
your brand.
Yeah, the brand, the Long Island oyster story, and the fact that Blue Points are making a comeback. So
awesome.
Blue Point Brewery, like I said, is probably my best.
Client.
They're awesome to me, and I work with the marketing team, I work with the sales team, I do all kinds of different stuff with them. But as far as restaurants, and occasionally I'll pop up at like a Catch Oyster bar. Mike Avino's got something going on. We're actually doing it Thursday, March 31st, doing a shucking class. So he sells tickets, and Blue Point supplies the beer, and I actually teach you how to shuck. We talk about the history of oysters, and we do a pairing. And
cool.
It's really cool. It's actually, a good way for me to get one-on-one time with different people, and they get to ask questions. And for me, that's fun.
What about when people cut themselves?
Yeah, we supply gloves too. Okay. But I cut myself a lot to get to where I am today. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Early on in the process, I had a chainmail glove that I would wear for a long time, and that helps a lot. I could dive with sharks with this thing. You can stab yourself pretty good. But now I always wear gloves that I get from the hardware store, basically. It's
like getting good at anything. I remember when I was a boater, and something happened, and older boater came up to me and said, "Hey, do this and do that," and I did that and this, and everything was working again. I was like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "How'd you know that? Like, how do you know so much?" He was like, "From fucking up." He's like, "How else do you know anything?"
That's true.
Yeah, if you're not cutting yourself shucking oysters, you're doing it wrong. No, not really. You should never cut yourself. It's usually a weak shell too. Like if you have a really good oyster, you shouldn't cut yourself. Sometimes the shell will break, and that's how it happens. Or it's usually just too much pressure. I tell people it's all in the wrist, and just watch a lot of YouTube videos. That's the best way to learn anything.
YouTube saved the world.
How often do you guys do the shucking classes over at Catch?
We've been doing it every few months, actually. I think we've done 3 or 4 so far, and
you get a nice crowd.
Yeah, it's been great. Really good local people. Everybody's supportive. My guy named Troy is a salesman there for Blue Point, and he puts it together with Mike. And it's just good people. I like the Patchogue scene over here. It's really good.
Yeah.
it's cool out in Bayshore too. I just I feel more of an affinity to this crowd.
Feel more of a connection.
Yeah.
Right in Sayville, so you're kind of in between these two places.
Exactly.
In addition to oysters, you fish anything else?
Well, I didn't grow up a fisherman. My dad was a clammer, and I go out with friends occasionally. We'll catch bass or whatever.
I go sea robin fishing.
Yeah, that's the most common.
I catch sea robin and spider crabs.
Yeah.
Yeah, the occasional, thresher shark, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds fun. So, how did you get into, into oyster farming? Was it like a romantic thing? You just felt a pull to get out onto the water, or was it just like I need some money?
I worked for a wholesale company for a while, so I got to know all the product from
Blue Island?
Canada. Yeah, Blue Island.
Okay.
So
Okay, go ahead.
he's in Sayville too, and I grew up in Sayville. My mom actually took care of the owner's son at her daycare many years ago, and I just started learning more and more about oysters and becoming more interested, and it kind of became, I guess, an unexpected, focus of mine. I was kind of like, I never grew up really eating oysters. My parents ate seafood, but not like, raw oysters in the half shell. And now I find myself seeking them out and, going to restaurants. And
You're into it. You got into it.
I'm into it, yeah.
Awesome.
And the farming thing is just because I was always outside anyway, and I like to snowboard and surf, and I don't mind the cold generally.
Yeah.
So, at some point I was a Naked Cowboy. I don't know if you heard about that. But,
I knew all about this, and this is what I was building toward.
In Manhattan?
to promote the oysters at the time. There's Naked Cowboy Oyster Company, and the original guy from Cincinnati, Ohio, Robert Burke.
Is that one of these pictures over here?
I don't think I have any pictures of the Naked Cowboy, but I can show you right now.
That's true.
I always keep my underwear on underneath.
Let's backtrack for a second. So was it wasn't Blue Island Oysters that came up with the Naked Cowboy?
Yeah. So
where did it all come from, and how's it connect to Manhattan and you portraying? I mean, this guy's played guitar in Times Square.
Yeah. So he just wanted to. He wants to retire someday. It was the original Naked Cowboy.
Okay.
Robert. So
does he have a good pension plan?
Yeah, exactly. So Robert wanted to franchise the idea. He was at the time he was like, wouldn't it be great if we had all these other Naked Cowboys that were paying him $500 a month franchise fee or whatever. I was like, that sounds crazy, but so does what he's been doing for all these years. You probably saw him on MTV, like TRL, like
Sure.
back in the day. He used to do a lot of stuff, and he still does. He's got like a Fruit of the Loom endorsement. So what I was doing was basically I was just going in on my own time and dressing up and
dressing down
and getting tips. I was getting stripper money basically. It was like dollars shoved in my underwear and my guitar. And on a good night, I could make like $350, $400 in cash in a few hours. Basically
and where
taking
would you
pictures
go?
with people. Just in Times Square between
So you would be in Times Square
between I guess was it between 43rd and 46th really or 47th. Between Broadway and 7th.
Now, was your hair longer at the time?
I had long hair, and actually, it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. It was like the best fitness program you could imagine is going out naked in Times Square, because now I was obsessed with getting in shape, like eating properly, and now I'm worried about how I look. You can cover a lot with your clothes, but when you're out there and there's people critiquing you regularly, like, oh my God, look, like he's hairy. Oh my God, so I shaved. They don't want a hairy chest. All right, I'll shave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you have no tan whatsoever. So I go stand up paddling in a Speedo and try to get rid of the tan lines because I had these board shorts tan lines.
Now, when you were doing this, and you and I have talked about this before, and I never asked, were people like, because he was the original Naked Cowboy. What's his full name?
Robert Burke.
Robert Burke. He was such a well-known character. Would people come up to you, be like, "You're not"? Would they think you're an imposter, or did people not notice the difference? I'm sure you had a mix of all things.
Yeah, in the beginning, I was kind of fearful of that, and pretty much what he put in my head was, it doesn't matter. Like, doesn't matter. They just want to see like a star. They came to New York. Yeah. Almost everybody I talked to was not from New York. Anybody from New York wouldn't, if you're self-respecting New Yorker, you're gonna avoid downtown, and you're definitely not gonna take a picture of a Naked Cowboy. But no, I shouldn't say that, because I have had random people say, "Oh, I have a picture with you," But I don't know if it's me or if it's him, because the original guy he was like a Playgirl model. He's ripped. He works out all the time. Yeah. He eats nothing but healthy food. He's pretty obsessed, and he has been for a long time. He's focused, I should say. He loves Tony Robbins, which I think is hysterical. That crazy inspirational speaker guy. Yeah. And I never became that. I kind of found myself in a position, like I said, I play music, and I never wanted to be in a cover band. I always wanted to play original music. Yeah. and I felt like being the Naked Cowboy became like a cover of. I was doing everything he would do, and I didn't really have a lot of creative outlet for myself. I was just wearing his underwear, his hat, I was doing his idea, and it worked. Like it could work for anybody. Literally, anybody can go out there and make a lot of cash because all you need is a busker's, basically a tax ID that says you're a busker, and as long as you report how much money you make and you pay your taxes, it's a solid job.
I bet it would work at Alive After 5.
I did it Alive After 5 actually once. Yeah, you don't remember that?
No.
It was Dave Kennedy. I think it was Dave Kennedy. He was like, Keenan, we really want you to do it. It was when I was into it, and he was like, it'd be cool. So I was ready to do it. I was all geared up, and they're like, actually, can you wear like a bathing suit? Because I don't think Patchogue's quite ready for that. So I came and I did it in a bathing suit, and there's definitely pictures somewhere of me.
You could probably pull it off now. I think Patchogue's finally ready for it.
Yeah, now my body's not ready for it.
Go hit the gym. So now what's stopping me and Nick from just going into Times Square, getting our tax ID number and putting a hat and wearing tidy whities and playing a guitar? Like why'd you need the franchise permission?
Maybe that's where he kind of lost his sight or vision. Nobody ever did it.
Yeah.
It was an idea. I didn't say it was successful. It was an idea of his, and his idea was like, oh, Keenan is one of my first franchise, so we'll get more franchises. But I never paid him any money. He actually paid me money, and it was fun. I think it was uplifting for him and me to
try something.
a new experience.
So really, there's only been 2 Naked Cowboys on this earth, and it's you and him.
No, there's actually been quite a few.
Okay.
And he's got a naked cowgirl as his wife.
Okay.
And he's still trying to get it out there. It is what it is. He's more popular in other countries. So if you go to like Australia or something, or he's traveled, and people are blown away by it.
Wow. And the whole cowboy allure is interesting to foreigners as well.
Yeah, the cow, and being in New York City too, it's kind of fun.
And how'd you guys meet up, over Facebook or something?
Through the oysters. It was the old Blue Island Oyster Company that created.
Oh, yeah, this is how we were tying it in. So how did the diver caught Long Island Sound oysters become named Naked Cowboy? And what's a connection to Burke?
It was the owner of that wholesale company that said, we're making deliveries here. It would cost a lot of money to put my name on a billboard. Why don't we just do it right here on the ground floor, put my name on his guitar, and pay him a franchise fee and create a brand.
Yeah.
And everybody laughed because you're like, oh, the high-end clientele that are buying oysters aren't going to want the Naked Cowboy. This,
guy and his tidy whities.
So like the lowbrow and the highbrow, and it does work.
I like that.
It's one of those things that nobody could have ever predicted would be a good idea.
That's so cool. Branding is key, right? Branding is king.
Yeah, you got to take risks, basically. People that don't take risks, I feel like, are just mediocre. But if you do something super risky, then you have a chance to excel or completely fail.
Right. Yeah, well, you can't be afraid of failing, right?
Yeah, so Tall Mutha Shucka is part of that. I went over in my head a couple of times. I was like, is this too offensive? Do people want to hear something that sounds like Tall Mutha Shucka?
Yeah.
Turns out they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like that Apple commercial. It's the crazy ones who actually change the world.
Yeah.
We just had a Marry, Fuck, Kill reference on our Kegs and Eggs video at Hatch in Huntington, and that seemed to go over really well. We're just, if we're like...
Push the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, if we're like undecided on whether to push an envelope, if we're like 50-50, we're always going to sway toward pushing the envelope, Sometimes it's clear that you can't do that, But if you're like, I don't know, I think we should always go, yes.
Yeah, because we live in like this new media world where it's like, these traditional media sites or businesses or whatever, they can't.
Fios and News 12 can't make a Marry, Fuck, Kill reference.
Yeah, exactly. We can kind of push it.
Hunter.
Exactly, but we still, sustain that journalistic quality and integrity. But we just add a lot of fun to it.
Yeah, exactly. So now, as far as your ability to start getting out there yourself onto the bay and farming, how many years you have to wait for something like that? And once you get your acreage underwater, what the hell happens next?
Yeah, that's a whole process unto itself. So what I'm waiting for is for and I'm on a long list of people. Town of Islip holds that. I'm like number 30 at this point because I kind of moved up as people got their farms, and people default on it because you have to pay $750 a month. I'm sorry, $750 a year per acre. So if you get 2 acres, that's pretty common, 2-acre farm. You're paying $1,500 a year to just start working, and then you have to get licensed by the Coast Guard, DEC, and
the county.
This is actually Town of Islip that's doing this. So I'm not sure if county is involved at all.
I know county leases some bay bottoms as well.
Yeah, they're mostly, I think, out in
Out
Riverhead,
east, right.
you know, Mccormick.
Mhm.
So I thought about going out there too. I just, you know, for me, I'd rather, commute wise, I'd rather just jump in a boat and shoot across instead of driving out.
Yeah,
so
that's a drag.
yeah, I used to live in Riverhead, and it doesn't seem that far, and it's just like, forget it. I'm a South Shore boy.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
But if I could get my acreage, I don't know if I'd be able to make any money there, to be honest. It's so much work.
Yeah.
And it seems really like straightforward, but unless you're retired with a pension or you have some kind of income, maybe you got like a settlement because you got into a car accident, something like that.
Right.
That's really the only way to spend the next couple of years of your life not making any money, just working.
I'll tell you what to do right now. Just drive through that traffic circle outside a couple times, and you'll get your.
You'll
accident.
definitely get it. No one knows what to do when they get to a traffic circle.
Waverly Avenue traffic circle.
And then obviously you have your startup costs. You know, you're gonna
Your
need
boat?
a boat. You're gonna need all that, all the cages or bags,
And
or
the
whatever
seed,
it is.
you know, like
And
you
the
want
seed.
to plant like 1 million little baby oysters, but you have to spend, you know, $20,000 or $25,000 on basically a sack that's the size of my fist.
Oh, wow.
Of these tiny, tiny little oyster seed. And then you cut it up like it looks like drugs. You like put it out on the counter with a credit card.
You making a cake, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, what I imagine drugs would look like. And then you put in these smaller bags, and then that's basically the whole process. You keep, you know, sorting, counting, grading, and moving from, you know, into larger and larger bags until those spread out and take up the whole acreage.
Wow.
But you have to keep, like I said, setting yourself up so you just keep spending more money, so that way when you do harvest, you'll have something else coming up in the works, and harvest again and harvest again. You can't really just, you know, set yourself up for one harvest and then be done. You have to
almost have to borrow money to live for a couple of years until this thing starts to propagate itself.
Yeah, and then one rough winter, like last winter, it was just frozen for months, you know? Like this winter was pretty easy on everybody, unless it's just starting right now. I don't even know what's going on with the cold
It's
right
like
now.
the coldest day of the year right now.
Well, if it freezes over, you can't work really. Up, you know, in Canada, they'll go out. They have machinery. They can go out with chainsaws and cut
They
the
know
ice.
about
and-
cutting through ice up in Canada.
yeah. So on the Great South Bay, if it freezes, you're pretty much just out of business for a while.
Yeah. It's like when it snows in Atlanta. The whole city shuts down.
Oh, yeah. There's like an inch of snow.
Yeah,
Cars
It's
crashing
amazing
into each
how
other.
like societies adapt.
Yeah. What do you see the future of oysters? I know they exploded onto the scene now. I know, is there going to be a point where they've been overfished? You know, what's the future?
Yeah, the bubble has not burst, and I think because of the farming, you know, because of plastics really that create an environment where we can farm. They're basically these plastic bags that didn't used to exist years ago when oysters were this popular. So I think they're just going to keep growing because of technology too. Like I said about spawning earlier, there's a new, you know, basically not a new, but there's two different types. There's triploids and diploids, or diploids and triploids, however you want to say it. And these ones don't they don't go through that process. They don't create babies basically, and then the meat stays good year round, and they don't change. So that's a new type of oyster that, you know, could just keep getting more and more popular, I think, and just more harvestable, and the quality just keeps going up. And because we just keep taking the best of the best with the brood stock, the oysters just keep getting better.
It's like the seedless watermelon.
Exactly. It's very similar, actually.
Now these oysters, so the oysters that people are farming for and they're putting into the bays in the Sound right now, they actually can't reproduce for the most part, right? That's what you're saying?
A lot of them can't, yeah. So that kind of negates. People say that they, you know, the oysters filter. People say 50 gallons of water a day per oyster. So we're cleaning up the water. That's true as long as they're out there. But they're not just going to go out and seed's not going to spread, and they're not going to set up in the wild unless we plant the specific type that will do that.
And even that is a challenge because of predators.
Yeah, and also just nature. It has to be the water has to be just the right temperature, and they have to just meet in the right place at the right time. It's really difficult to make it happen unless you're inside of a hatchery and inducing it and changing the water temperature and the light and really
setting it up for these
Yeah,
oysters to get busy.
turn on Barry Manilow, turn the lights
Log
down low.
Light some candles, put the fire on. Now, before we let you go, what is your knowledge of the clam industry, and can you kind of tell us, I'm sure you've absorbed some of this information by osmosis, what's going on with clams in the bay, and where are we at with that?
Clams were over harvested, so it was a result of a lot of raking the bottom.
Guys like your dad and Jim Avino and countless others, right?
All these guys thought there was never going to be an end.
Yeah.
And turns out it's a finite supply out there. So there's people that are still trying to plant seed. And Town of Islip used to have a program.
Nature Conservancy used to do it off of West Sayville.
Yeah, they've really changed their focus to oysters, as you've probably noticed.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's because people aren't consuming clams like they used to. You know, they still do, but the clams, just the interest is not where it used to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the clams are going to make a comeback, but there are a lot of people growing them up in Connecticut and further north. Like I said, the price is still low, and there's no differentiation in the meat as much. It's not kind of like you can't really tell the difference between a clam that's from the Peconic or a clam from Great South Bay or a clam from a different location, so it's not as interesting for people to have.
Sure, yeah, you don't have that like wine tasting aspect of it.
Yeah.
A little neck clam tastes like a little neck clam, no matter where. It might be meatier on the Sound one season, and a little grayish somewhere else, but they're still kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's kind of less complex. And like I said, there's not as many young foodies or hipsters or whatever.
Yeah, the hipsters. We go with the hipsters. We gravitate to the hipsters. Yeah, so when the clams sort of got overfished, and I guess it's a chicken or an egg thing. So 1986, I think, was the first massive brown tide that
May
turned
1st, 2000.
Yeah, it was a late spring afternoon when the chocolate milk colored water crept into the Great South Bay, and I don't know.
That was page 4.
Yeah, I don't know if that was because of the clams weren't there to filter this stuff, or whatever conditions occurred. But ever since then, these clams haven't come back whatsoever, and it's curious to see. I think it's just nature at the end of the day, and different factors in our environments. Like I think the Long Island Sound going up a slight degree in temperature killed like the entire lobster industry, and there hasn't been lobsters in the Sound for like 15 years now. It's just amazing how these slight little variables could affect people's livelihoods.
It does make for
ecosystems.
It makes for an interesting industry because you look around and there's people, like I said, that geared up for lobsters, and they're like, all right, well, we don't have lobsters, so now I guess we're doing oysters, Or, So there's people that are in the business kind of involuntarily just because that's what's here right now. And scallops did really well last season. The season before that, there was nothing.
Wow, yeah.
It's feast or famine.
Yeah, you got to get in early, man. Get involved with Scungili now.
All right, can we segue into eating these oysters? Are you like a purist? It's like, I got to have nothing on there.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Oh, yeah.
You got the vinegar sauce now, and you got the horseradish and the Tabasco. And
Well, that's what I say about
What does Tall Mutha Shucka eat?
eating
Yeah.
naked, first of all.
Naked, okay.
You got to get tidy whities, though. No bathing suits.
Exactly. No, I mean, the oyster's naked, not you.
You got to get naked, and then you order your
So
oysters.
put on a robe, grab yourself an oyster, and don't put anything on it. No. I like, a really good mignonette. Basically, Mignonette is how it's pronounced in French.
Okay.
But nobody says
Mignonette.
Okay, that's good to know.
it. New Yorkers say mignonette. But,
Mignonette.
yeah, exactly.
They had an eye onto it.
Exactly. So it's just basically shallots and red or white wine vinegar and some cracked peppercorn mixed together, and then you let it sit overnight. And, I guess my fiance Anna makes a delicious mignonette with cilantro, some hot pepper in there,
Oh, nice.
a little ginger. She mixes it up and makes all different variations.
Splash
I
of
think I've
hot
had it.
sauce.
I think
Little
I've had it
mint.
before.
Oh yeah, I think you did have
A
it.
blue point. A blue point.
Yeah, a
a blue point day.
it's a blue point de mignonette. Yeah, she did. It was the VIP Cask Festival last year. I think she made that.
Right.
So you made like she made a classic. Oh, you put a little sugar in there too. It balances out the vinegar.
Delicious. Yeah.
So that's really good. I mean, people drown them in cocktail sauce, but then you might as well be eating the clam. It doesn't. You're not going to taste it. You're going to just feel the mouthful of cocktail.
Yeah.
Is there a specific way to eat it for the beginners out there? Is there a certain way to grab the oyster?
Yeah, you just kind of slurp it down. People say take like a chew or two, especially on the first one. Kind of hold it in your mouth for a minute and kind of let the flavor sink in. I guess you got that sweetness right off the bat. So if you swallow it too fast, you're only going to taste the salty.
Yeah.
So if you really want to get the sweetness, you kind of hold it in your mouth for a minute.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of is like that wine.
The worst is when they're shucking them and they don't properly slice them off the shell, and you're trying to and then you have to scrape at them with your teeth.
Exactly.
Come on in, Benny.
That becomes an issue.
Yeah.
What's up, Benny?
What's up?
Benny Migliorino. Benny Miggs photo just walked into the studio. So what were you saying? Yeah. So what is that?
It's called the
part of the
adductor muscle. So it's
that's what you eat a scallop, right? It's actually
exactly.
the
It is a
muscle.
scallop. Exactly. So the reason it's called a bivalve is because the two shells are, it's a two-shell organism. And they're held together, and that's held tight. And the oyster's alive until the moment you shuck it. So you slice the top of the adductor, then you kind of go back with the knife and slice the bottom. Unless, like you said, Shucker didn't do their job.
It's the worst.
And then you look ridiculous. You have to.
I hope my girlfriend's listening to this because I had this conversation with her the other day, and I think she was looking at me like I was just making it up as I went along.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's that muscle. What's interesting about the scallop is that you eat that muscle and everything else gets tossed aside. With clams and oysters, you don't eat that muscle.
That's true, and a good shucker will present it without that disturbed. The gills will be laid out perfectly, the muscle will be intact, and it'll just be kind of a smooth layer of meat. And if it looks like a scrambled egg, then you know your shucker's either a beginner or just having an off day. Give him a drink.
Hungover.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. What's next for Soundswell, man? You guys in the studio or what?
Soundswell is definitely getting a lot of recording done right now. So
Excellent.
The band that I'm in, we're actually currently a 5-piece. Actually, no, we're up to 6. 6-piece band. We change a lot, or it's kind of a revolving or like a flow of members, but the original core is still there, and we've actually got this really amazing recording that we're looking to come out with 4 tracks, probably right before we play Rockwood Music Hall, which is in April 21st.
Oh, cool.
So
let me know, man. We'll do our best to let people know about the new
Swell
LP.
Yeah, I guess an EP. We're calling it, right. 4 tracks. But
going back into my mind.
Yeah, we're in this place. We're calling it the Jam Lab in an undisclosed location
Excellent.
in Patchogue, and we're actually making it.
That means it's in someone's mom's garage.
Super secretive, top secret.
Awesome.
But no, it's going to be an epic, piece of music history once it's done. And we've always done stuff in Patchogue. We've always been located in this area downtown. It's where we focus. So hopefully you feel a little bit of that Patchogue vibe in the music.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Terroir of
Patchogue. You'll taste Patchogue in the music.
Oh man, this has been awesome, and great to see you again on a personal level, and good to have you in the studio and cover all these bases. I'm fascinated with oysters and clams and all that stuff, as you know.
Yeah.
But and Nick skipped back from Blue Point the other day talking about
I
his
met this
meeting with
Tall
you.
Mutha Shucka.
Yeah, he's so tall.
Yeah, Nick, I just met at the opening, I guess, for the media of the Blue Point Brewery.
Yeah.
So they finally announced April 14th.
14th, yeah.
They're going to be open over there.
Oh, they have an exact date?
Yeah.
Do we pop that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So yeah, Nick was up there getting the samples of. They actually have a Blue Point oyster topped burger over there. They fry a couple of oysters and they put them on top of the burger, and it's ridiculous.
Phenomenal.
Some blue cheese.
April 14th. I turned 40 like a week later, so maybe we could do something over at Blue Point.
Yeah, big Blue Point party.
Drop some hints.
Yeah, Mike, I've been seeing you ever since, I think, 89 North at one time, like many years ago. We first met.
Yes.
Soundswell was playing.
Yeah, the fundraiser.
So yeah, it's probably been 5 or 6 years. So I'm glad to be down here. Thanks for inviting me down here.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for welcoming me into town too. When I started the site, you were one of the first 2 people I met.
Nice.
I think I met you before David Kennedy.
Yeah, I like what you're doing here. And
Now, this is episode 21, Lucky Blackjack, so I'm excited that we got you on.
oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
You want to take us out, Nick?
All right, let's go. Keenan, thank you again for joining us. This was awesome. It's great to see you again. This is the 495 podcast. You could catch us on Spotify, iTunes,
Apple Podcasts.
Podcast. Please like us, review us, give us some 5 stars. That'd be very helpful.
All right. Hopefully this was a 5-star interview.
I never felt before in my current state and in these days of war. We must grow together or the end is near. Thicken up your skin and loosen up your fears. I've been waiting, reading through my limitations, choosing to move.